Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever get frustrated when an AI, one that's supposed to, look things up, still gives you a wrong answer?
Oh, definitely. It happens all the time.
Well, today we're diving into a really interesting new angle on this. We're looking at a report that analyzes an ICLR 2025 paper called Sufficient Context, a new lens on retrieval augmented generation.
Right. RG systems. That's retrieval augmented generation, where the AI fetches info to answer you. But the problem is they still hallucinate. They just make stuff up sometimes.
Even with the retrieved info right there, it's baffling.
Exactly. And it makes fixing them really hard.
So the core question this research asks, and this is crucial for you listening, is when the AI messes up, is the AI just bad at using the info? Or was the information it was given actually not good enough to answer the question in the first place?
Enough of it. And this paper, it introduces this concept, sufficient context. It's a new benchmark, really.
Okay, interesting. Tell me more. What is sufficient context?
So it's actually a pretty straightforward idea grounded in, well, human understanding.
Okay.
Could a careful, diligent human reader answer the question only using the information provided? No outside knowledge, no leaps of logic.
Ah, I see. So the info itself has to contain everything needed. It has to resolve any, ambiguities in the question, too.
Precisely. It has to be totally self-contained for that specific question.
Makes sense. So it's not just, is the answer technically findable, but could someone really figure it out just from that snippet?
You got it. And get this. They built an AI tool. They call it the Sufficient Context Autorator.
An AI to judge the context.
Yeah, basically. Using Gemini 1.5 Pro, with just a single example prompt, apparently, and it lines up with human judgments about 93% of the time.
Wow, 93%, that's pretty good. And the key thing is?
The key thing is it doesn't need the actual correct answer to evaluate the context.
Okay, so you can check the info quality before the main AI even tries to generate an answer, like a quality checkup stream.
Exactly, a proactive check, which leads to some interesting findings when they applied it.
Right, they looked at existing data sets, didn't they? Like Hotpot QA and others. What did they find there? That might surprise you.
Well, yeah, it might. They found that a lot of the context snippets that are considered, gold or correct in these standard benchmarks were actually insufficient by this new, stricter definition.
No way. So the data sets we're using to test these AIs might actually be leading us astray.
It certainly suggests that. It means we might be evaluating models based on flawed assumptions about the data quality.
Okay, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So how did different AI models actually react to sufficient versus insufficient context?
Yeah, good question. So the big models like GPT-4o, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, they generally did pretty well when the context was sufficient. Few hallucinations. Claude 3.5 Sonnet was particularly good, only like 3% hallucination.
Oh, wait, that's what you told me.
But efficiently, when the context was insufficient, these big models were much more likely to hallucinate, to just guess or make something up.
Rather than just saying, I don't know.
Right. Instead of refusing to answer, GPT-4o had like a 13% hallucination rate, even with good context. But that jumps way up, like 15-40% generally for large models. With insufficient context, they seem a bit overconfident.
Huh. So they try to answer anyway.
Yeah. And what's also fascinating is that even with bad context, they still got the answer right maybe 35% of the time by basically falling back on their internal pre-trained knowledge, their parametric memory, which, can actually hide the fact that the ARGIS system isn't properly grounding the answer in the provided text.
So it looks like ARGIS is working, but the model is just remembering the answer. Sneaky.
Kinda, yeah. And smaller open source models like Llama 3.1 or Mistral,
How did they do?
they generally struggled more across the board, more hallucinations, or just refusing to answer, even when the context was sufficient.
Okay. And you mentioned something about RAG making things worse.
Yeah, this was a really interesting paradox. Sometimes giving a model bad context via RAG can actually make it less likely to refuse to answer.
Wait, so bad info makes it more likely to guess?
It seems that way sometimes. It reduces its ability to say, I don't know. Counterintuitive, right?
Totally. Even Gemini 1.5 Pro, the model used for the autorator, even when it was acting as the question-answering model, it didn't always refuse to answer, even when its own autorator function flagged the context as insufficient.
Wow. Okay, so there's a disconnect there. So how do we start fixing this? How do we make our RAG systems more reliable for you, the user?
What's the proposed solution?
They suggest something called selective RAG.
Selective RAG. Okay.
The idea is to combine two signals. First, that sufficient context score from the auditor we talked about.
Right.
And second, the AI's own confidence score in the answer it generated. You feed both into a simple logistic regression model.
And that model decides.
It decides whether the final answer should be given or if the AI should just say, sorry, I can't answer based on the information I have.
So it adds a layer of judgment. Did it help?
Yeah, it seemed to. It improved the accuracy on the questions the AI did choose to answer by about 2 to 10%, depending on the model.
So fewer wrong answers getting through. That's definitely progress.
It's about making the AI better at knowing what it doesn't know based on the evidence.
Now, you mentioned they shared their work. There's a GitHub repository.
That's right, AOMUJA Sufficient Context. And the good news for reproducibility for anyone wanting to build on this is the reame file.
What's in it?
It has the exact prompts they used for the sufficient context auditor and also for their other evaluations. That's really valuable.
Transparency is key. Any issues with the repo?
Well, when the analysis was done, it seemed to be missing things like a clear software license or easy ways for others to contribute. Maybe less detail on who did what, small things, but they can affect community use.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's pull this all together. What's the main takeaway for you listening?
I think the big thing is that this sufficient context framework gives us a much sharper tool. It helps us evaluate and improve our RD systems by focusing squarely on the quality of the information the AI receives.
Not just whether the final answer happened to be right or wrong.
Exactly. It gets underneath that. And it really highlights how overconfident some of these big models can be.
Yeah, and the need for them to actually ground their answers in the provided info, assuming that info is good enough.
For sure. And this selective RAG idea, it feels like a practical step towards AI that's more trustworthy because it knows its own limits better.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do we design future AI systems to have maybe better self-awareness about the quality of the information they're using? And how could they integrate that awareness more deeply beyond just deciding whether to answer a question? That feels like a whole other deep dive.
Definitely a space to watch.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.